First of all, the question is, what are we going to call this podcast? What is the name of this podcast? Sophie's idea was Leaves of Ass.
No.
No. Okay, her other idea was Can't Stanza.
That's a pretty good one. I like that one.
Maybe
It's a better it's a better title, but none of us are like stand-up guys, and it sounds like a very like.
What is your idea for the name?
Okay,
then?
I don't. I think that Not Fit for Composition is way better than those three just by being more neutral.
Wow, okay.
Because
I mean, that's the one I originally wanted to go with, but then I got dissuaded from it because a bunch of people were telling me it was bad.
I don't think it's bad. It doesn't have like a catch, but I don't know if we need the gimmick title. And
yeah, maybe you're right.
Like
maybe
the
I'm
one I like the most that you just said, the stanza one. That sounds like it's way more like supposed to be explicitly like, now we're gonna make a joke.
Right. Right. Is this not going to be a comedy podcast?
I mean,
what is this
it'll be. It's not like it's comedy, but it's not like comedy guy. Which is
true.
Yeah, which is what I guess the distinction I was making.
That's true. I think this whole discussion, except for the parts where I cut out you talking about people that you hate, will be a really good intro to the first episode. Like maybe the first episode just starts with us talking about the name of the podcast.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like we should just cut to the chase and name it Who Cares About Poetry?
Who cares about poetry? That's pretty good. I do like that. Well, whatever we end up naming it by the time this episode is out, the name will be solidified, and so it'll be, it's kind of a moot point to everyone who's listening. So I just want to say thank you both for taking some time for this endeavor. We've been trying to do this for a little while now, and if this goes poorly, my idea is that we can just bury it and never talk about it again. I'm going to edit out any bad jokes or anything weird that happens.
Okay.
And I think in the end of the day, we're just making this for our friends, and we all have fun and exciting things to say, and the delusion that maybe our words matter and that people want to hear what we have to say. So maybe we're perfect for a podcast.
I have no delusion that anyone thinks I have anything to say.
Yeah,
that's fair.
And
maybe it's just me.
No, I think I could probably articulate it better, but I don't think any of us are under the illusion that like most people read, and when they do, they read like memoirs by people who are on The Office or something. They don't read poetry. Or I mean,
honestly, I feel like a lot of the poetry we're gonna talk about on here, a lot of people like. So
okay,
who am I to say what is good and what is bad? Because obviously a lot of these people have sold a lot of books. So
that's true.
It doesn't even really matter at the end of the day.
That's true. Okay, if I had written theme music, I would cue the theme music right now. But maybe after we record it, I'll be like, cue theme music. Boom.
Poetry.
So thank you for listening to the first episode, the test pilot episode of our podcast has yet to be named. I'm the host. My name is August Smith. And with me, I have two of my very best friends and co-hosts here. I have Eleanor Eli Moss here in the studio with me. Eleanor, how are you?
I'm doing okay. I've never recorded a podcast before, so I'm a little nervous, but...
Yeah, it feels odd.
Yeah, fuck it. I've had 3 beers. Oh, shit. Can we swear?
Yeah, we can swear. We can swear as much as we like. This is fine.
Okay,
maybe
cool.
my parents will listen, but that's okay.
I wasn't sure what the vibe was, but
Yeah,
I
I know.
can't swear. I'm going to be in trouble.
We're not trying to syndicate this on public television, so that's fine. And then the other co-host here is Marcus Corey calling in from Queens, my good friend Marcus. Marcus, how was your day?
It could have been better. It could have been worse. I'm here in a basement studio that actually wasn't too much of a setup, considering I have miscellaneous recording equipment lying around here in any case.
Yeah, I feel like your house is mostly like raw meat in the fridge and then like recording equipment and like a pretty Spartan setup as far as furniture goes, if I remember correctly.
Spartan is charitable. I'll take it.
So I wanted, since this is the first episode, I wanted to like, obviously we've talked about the title. I wanted to talk about the origins and also my visions for this podcast and what it could be. So as far as the origins go, Marcus, this was about 4 months ago, I think. You said to me that, and I quote almost directly, that it is toxic that I don't have a podcast. Do you remember why you said this?
Probably because I had something that I thought was witty, but as I echo to you in different iterations, like once a month, I'm a low-key person without any social media presence, really, aside from people who know me really well. So if I have a good idea, I'm just like, oh, isn't it a shame, Rags, who's the most charismatic and the best face for like voicing ideas or witty things, I might say, that he doesn't have a bigger platform other than his Twitter, which is far larger than any of my presences online or elsewhere.
That's true, but I want to say specifically, you said you wish you had you said it was toxic because that I didn't have a podcast because I was your friend who was most likely to have a podcast, which I agree with, and B, because you didn't have a place to talk about Napoleon in a public capacity. Could you explain what that means?
Can I explain what it means? That maybe I came to a Napoleon fixation prior to whatever the popular movie is. The guy who made Gladiator is making a Napoleon movie. So prior to that, but after, one might think, for someone who's like whatever done formal study about like academic study about French history and stuff, and that I had told your girlfriend, I had told Rayleigh that I hate podcasts and I think they suck because everyone's inarticulate and the audio quality always leaves something to be desired. But the Napoleon podcast that you directed me to, I think at least has merits, and it made me reevaluate podcasting in general. So I felt more favorable after you showed me that Napoleon podcast. And I mean, to date, probably for the last 18 months, I've been on a Napoleon wave.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like, within our personal Discord, you've been talking about like this day in Napoleon history and stuff. So I want to say at the end of this episode, and we can just splice it in if you don't have anything prepared, but at the end of this episode, I do want to give you like a Napoleon minute where you can just go off and just, say, get that out of your system, right?
Okay.
And then Eleanor, you and I know each other through poetry things. Maybe you can explain without giving too much detail about how we know each other.
I mean, we basically just met each other on Tumblr back in
wow, do we meet on Tumblr? I thought we met on Twitter.
I'm pretty sure it was Tumblr, at least for a little bit. That's where I first saw you.
Okay.
Because I started off just posting stuff on Tumblr. And then, I don't know when exactly we all decided, but there was like an unspoken thing that like all the Tumblr posts just moved to Twitter eventually. I think it was in like 2013, 2014. And so after I started posting more on Twitter, we kind of started interacting more.
Wow. Yeah. And then I moved to Austin and then we became friends because we worked at a bookstore together.
Yeah, it was pretty nice. I do remember the night you moved or the night you got here. There was a big party, and
That's
we went
right.
to that party, and we played.
Yeah.
What was it? What was that game? Wine
Bago.
Bago. Yeah, where we threw the bag of wine around until it broke. That was
Yeah. So I've got you here because you've been within the poetry world with me for quite some time, both like in a direct way and indirect way. And I bring Marcus here because Marcus, you've also been with me on the poetry journey for quite some time. Maybe you can speak to some of that. Because
Yeah.
I've just involved you in a lot of it. I feel like I've just forced you to do it.
No, I don't consider myself having been shanghaied into it at all. It's always been out of my own volition. And in a self-aggrandizing turn of phrase, I'm just been a fellow traveler among you and your contemporaries for years now. Maybe partly because of my ability to remember the poems you've written and poems you've wanted to forget that you've written, that I'm somewhat of an authority on your corpus.
That's
And
true.
I'm one of those one of those people where maybe I've read a lot of people have read a lot, but I've read a scatter shot and am familiar with a complete grab bag of things. So I have a mix of massive blind spots and very niche perspectives, or non-blind spots, I should say,
I
along
would agree
with
with that.
whatever, having attended enough of your readings of other people, more well-known canonical modern poets and whatnot.
Plus, you've done a reading with me. You went poetry.
Yeah. I
we did a
mean,
poetry reading together in Boston
if
once, and you busted an entire suite of poems that I've never heard. Hadn't heard since.
well, I'm trying to think of the ancient Greek poesis. If the art of creating, if performing poetry once, if that creative act makes you a poet, then I'm a poet.
Does that, Eleanor? Does one poetry reading make you poet? Basically,
I mean, yeah, kind of. What constitutes a poet is kind of up in the air.
we're gonna get really into that. I think today because the person we have to talk about is indeed a poet. I wrote a paragraph of like copy.
Yeah, I saw it.
That it's an explanation for our podcast. I'm gonna read it right now. I want to get your real time reactions to it. Okay. In this podcast, we will be taking a critical look at the worst excesses of contemporary poetry landscape. From celebrity poetry books to influencer vanity projects to Instagram verse to the flarf, the slam, the alt-lit, all of it. We'll be reading the cream of the crop of the lowest of the brow. Does that sound? Does that cover? Is that good?
Yeah.
Is that good copy?
I mean,
I think it's
doing.
I think it's good, but also I don't even think when I was in grad school I used problematize. But to problematize your statement like lowbrow, it's not so much that it's not that I find that quote problematic unquote. It's that I don't know if any of these people or maybe that's something to discuss. These authors are presenting themselves or conceiving of themselves as lowbrow.
I don't think they conceive of themselves as lowbrow. I think
No, but I don't think you have to conceive of yourself as lowbrow to be lowbrow.
Okay.
I feel like also poetry also just like puts you in this like rarefied air. Like you're like, I'm writing poetry, so how could it be lowbrow? But what I would like to figure out is the distinction between highbrow and lowbrow poetry. Maybe that's like the entire project of this podcast, like figuring out what gets to be in.
Because like it's the obviously whoever was writing the poetry doesn't think of themselves as lowbrow, but if we think of them as lowbrow, does that make it automatically lowbrow, or just is that our opinion?
Yes, no, we are experts. You and I, we've been doing poetry for like 15 years, and Marcus is a academic with a wide array of intellectual, I've lost my train of thought. He's an intellectual. So, yeah.
God, please, that doesn't. I don't want that to be my legacy. But go on.
Yeah, being an intellectual is a horrible legacy to have.
We are all three intellectuals, and we are going to be swimming through the muck of contemporary poetry.
I'm a retired intellectual.
I'm a guitar guy.
Yep. Marcus is a guitar guy. For the first episode here, I wanted to pick something that was really like red meat for us, right? Like something that we can really sink our teeth into. And I think with that, we should just transition into talking about Earnest Cline. Ernest Christie Cline is an American science fiction novelist, poet, and screenwriter. He was born in Ohio and moved to Austin, where, from 1997 to 2002, he performed spoken word poetry as part of the Austin Poetry Slam scene. Cline also competed as part of the Austin Poetry Slam team at the 1998 Austin National Poetry Slam and the 2001 Seattle National Poetry Slam. In 2010, his novel Ready Player One was sold to Random House in a bidding war that ended in a 6-figure payout for Cline, along with a movie deal that would eventually develop into a Spielberg film, one that Cline co-wrote. His subsequent novels, 2015's Armada and 2020's Ready Player Two, were successful commercial publications in their own right, both nabbing 7-figure movie deals, but saw diminishing returns on the critical front.
Because he can't just rely on 80s references in Ready Player 2. He has to rely on character development and story, and he doesn't have any. I mean, admittedly, I haven't read it, but I know what happens in it, and it's not great. It kind of sucks.
Of course. What we're really here to talk about is his poetry book, which is called The Importance of Being Earnest. And what's interesting about this poetry book is that it falls on 2 points of our timeline, because indeed, while the book was republished by Right Bloody Publishing in 2013 as an attempt to catch some of the hype waves off of Ready Player One, it was originally published in 2001 as a handbound DIY chapbook sold and distributed during his slam poetry years. So I found this really old interview with Ernest Cline, and it was on this defunct website called Entertainment Geekly, and I had to find this through the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. But I found this interview with Ernest Cline from 2003, and this is before the release of Ready Player One, but after he was doing his slam poetry things. And here's what. Okay, it's kind of interesting because some of his poems from his chapbook went viral in this like early 2000s viral way where they were like being emailed around. And I was reading through this interview with him in Entertainment Geekly, and I guess what I found most interesting about it was he kind of talks about, to his credit, he doesn't really talk about. He gets asked whether his work is poetry or not, and he says, I don't think that most academic poets believe that slam adheres to their traditional definition of poetry, so they're probably offended that the term poetry is even applied to it. Now, the interviewer led into this question by saying that Canada's poet laureate at the time talked some shit about slam poetry. So I went back and found that. And I found George Bowering, who's the former poet laureate of Canada, condemned poetry slams as, quote, abominations that are, quote, crude and extremely revolting. So what do we think of slam poetry?
Well, I will say that I think that's one of slam poetry's strengths. And
What is one of its strengths? The fact that it's revolting?
yeah, that it can be crude and kind of stupid at a lot of times, because that's what poetry needs. That's like poetry needs an outlet for that, I think. 'Cause a lot of poetry is too up its own ass.
Okay,
in my
but
opinion.
you don't actually like slam poetry.
I don't, but I'm saying that is an element of it that I do appreciate still, despite me not
Okay.
liking it.
Marcus, your assessment on slam
I
poetry.
mean, I think it's really dumb. But you referencing the Canadian Poet Laureate is kind of striking, because my first encounter, I guess you could say, with slam poetry is whenever Canada hosted the Winter Olympics. They had a slam poet give recite some poem about Canada. I don't know if either of you remember that, but whenever Canada had
Definitely don't.
Okay, so I wasn't even someone who was eagerly watching the Olympics, but I do remember that a slam poet delivered a poem where we should look this up later, but where he's like, Canada is the new in what's new.
Canada is the what in what's new. So don't let your luggage define your travels. Each life unravels differently, and experiences are what make up the colors of our tapestry.
And that was my first encounter with slam poetry, and most of my subsequent encounters are just hearsay and secondhand because revolting is one of my typical descriptors for a wide range of things. So I am in accordance with aforementioned quoted poet laureate. But I think maybe the harshness of my judgment could be mitigated by how serious or not, and how self-aware or not, slam poets are. I don't know. I'm not acquainted enough with the quote scene, or not acquainted enough with any of the performers. Yeah.
I feel kind of ambivalent towards slam poetry personally. It's just like, it feels like low-hanging fruit to make fun of it, and it also feels like people are really vulnerable when they're doing their slam poetry, and like maybe it's like not the place to make fun of it.
Well, the thing about slam poetry for me, I don't want to knock like all of slam poetry, because there is some stuff out there that I do like, but what gets me usually is that the grading aspect, like you take these amazing performances, and you like the judges have to assign scores to them or whatever to decide whose is best, and that just leads to unhealthy practices, I think, because people know what will get a reaction from people, like emotionally. So you just end up with a bunch of like people who know what emotional moments to use in their poems to elicit a reaction from the judges, and it just turns into this whole manipulative thing that isn't really about the poetry necessarily, but it's about trying to perform the poetry in a way that people react to.
Trying to juice people's reactions, trying to get really good. Yeah, trying to make people cry a little bit. Marcus, our mutual friend Bob Sikora, used to talk about taking girls on dates to poetry slams.
Bobby.
And how Bobby. Go ahead.
I know. I mean, if we make any references to the poet from now on, it's Bobby Sikora.
Yeah, it's true. It's Bobby Sikora. And he used to talk about how every time he went to poetry slam, there would always be the person who wrote a poem about cancer. It would always be the winner.
Yeah, it's a go-to.
Yeah. And George Bowering, this former poet laureate of Canada, when I looked up his words about poetry slams, again being abominations and crude and extremely revolting, were because it's like a contest, right? It's like makes it into a horse race or something. He was like not into that, which is like fairly understandable despite his like maybe a little too harsh reading of it. I don't know. But then again, Poetry Slam's got us this book that we're about to read, which is genuinely the worst poetry book that I've ever read. So maybe that's an indictment of the whole thing.
Yeah, but I don't even think that's because of the poetry necessarily.
What do you mean? What the fuck do you mean?
Well, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it when we actually start discussing it. But like, as a writer, like technically, as a writer, he's not that bad of a writer. Like, he's got some good lines in there. He's got good wordplay. It's just I'm
fascinated by this take.
The problem is all of his writing makes him seem like a terrible person.
The Importance of Being Earnest, which was published by, like I said, Right Bloody Publishing in 2013. Where do you guys want to start with this book? Maybe we should start off by doing by reading a poem from this book, and I think there's only one poem that needs to be read from it. Let's listen to Ernest Cline himself reading Nerd Porn Auteur.
I've noticed that there don't seem to be any porno movies that are made for guys like me. All the porn I've come across was targeted at beer-swilling, sports bar-dwelling alpha males, men who like their women stupid and submissive, men who can only get it up for monosyllabic cock-hungry nymphos with gargantuan breasts and a 3-word vocabulary. Adult films are populated with these collagen-injected, liposuctioned women, many of whom have resorted to surgery and self-mutilation in an attempt to look the way they have been told to look. These aren't real women, they're objects. And these movies aren't erotic, they're pathetic. These vacuum-headed fuck bunnies don't turn me on, they disgust me. And it's not that I'm against pornography, I mean, I'm a guy. And guys need porn. Fact. Like a preacher needs pain, like a needle needs a vein, guys need porn. But I don't want to watch this misogynist He-Man woman-hater porn. I want porno movies that are made with guys like me in mind. Guys who know that the sexiest thing in the world is a woman who is smarter than you are. You can have the whole cheerleading squad. I want the girl in the tweed skirt and the horned-rimmed glasses. Betty Finnebowski, the valedictorian. Oh yes. First I want to copy her trig homework, and then I want to make mad, passionate love to her for hours and hours, until she reluctantly asks if we can stop because she doesn't want to miss Battlestar Galactica. Summa cum laude, baby. That is what I call erotic. Do you ever see that kind of a woman in a contemporary adult film? No, which is why I'm going to start writing and directing geek porno. I shall be the quintessential nerd porn auteur, and the women in my porno movies will be the kind that drive nerds like me mad with desire. I'm talking about the girls that used to fuck up the grading curve, the girls in the Latin Club, the National Honor Society, chicks with weird clothes, braces, 4 eyes, and 4.0 GPAs, brainy, articulate bookworms with Mensa cards in their purses and chips on their shoulders. My porn starlets will come in all shapes and sizes. My porn stars will be too busy working on their PhD to go to the gym. In my porn movies, the girls wouldn't even have to get naked. They just take the guys down to the rec room and beat them repeatedly at chess, and then talk to them for hours about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle or the underlying social metaphors in the Aliens movies. Buy stock in some hand cream companies because there's about to be a major shortage. And I'm not just talking about straight porn. Oh no, there should be fuck films for my nerd brethren of all sexual orientations. Gay nerd porn flicks with titles like Dungeons and Drag Queens. This idea is a fucking gold mine. I am gonna make millions because this country is full of database programmers and electronics engineers, and they aren't getting the loving they so desperately need. And you can help. If you're an intelligent woman who is interested in breaking into the adult film industry, and if you can tell me the name of Luke Skywalker's home planet, then you are hired. It doesn't matter if you think you're overweight or unattractive. It doesn't matter if you don't think you're beautiful. You are beautiful, and I will make you a star.
I mean, are we allowed to keep that in the podcast? Because that sounds like a copyright nightmare.
Okay, first of all, I don't care. What is he going to do? Second of all, I hate that poem so much.
Yeah.
I'm not even trying to be hyperbolic. I'm saying that is one of the worst poems I've ever heard. And
I've heard worse, but I think...
What have you heard worse than that? Tell me what you've heard worse than that. Tell me one poem that you've heard worse than that.
I don't know. I can't name the specific poems. I've been at some pretty fucking bad readings, man.
No, hey, come on. Nerd Poem Auteur? That is a bad poem.
Look, it's the worst poem I've heard that has gotten a lot of recognition. I will give you that.
What about the slam poem that you once quoted to me that has gone down is kind of like representative of the entire genre of someone saying reality is not what you see, it is you and me. And
I forgot about that one.
yeah, I mean, I think it's bad, but so when I read this, I think it took me maybe into like several lines down, maybe a few stanzas into it, where I could very much see that, okay, I can see that this is, rhythmically would be read out as slam poetry when he says, like, they're objects and these movies aren't erotic, they're pathetic. And in some of those lines, I can see where I could read it as slam poetry. And at some points, aside from not even making much commentary on the content, which is atrocious, there are points where I'm just like, this is just like the ranting on like an old Angel Fire like nerd site. And then it lapses kind of in and out of kind of rhythmically feeling like slam poetry. Yeah.
But I think it's very telling the kind of reactions that he was getting in those recordings, because the crowd was really into it. And I think it speaks volumes to what things were like, in the 90s and in the very early 2000s, because the internet wasn't really a big thing back then. And so a lot of these kind of, not really these underappreciated communities, which I assume included poetry, their only outlets for these kind of things were...
Okay. This is what I'm saying is like the fucked up thing about this poem is that he thinks he's being feminist.
Well, yeah, and at the time that was feminist. That was like the most feminist you could be in the 90s, because it's the fucking 90s.
It's just like, don't worry if you don't think you're a sex object. I think of you as a sex object. We can make this work.
But for different reasons than everyone else.
Yeah, this is what I talked about when I brought up Marcus's alternate masculinities things. It's like this like different version of masculinity where I think different things are hot, but at the end of the day, in my brain, you are doing porno and I am jacking off to you. And just because it's different from the jock reality or whatever means that it's sexually feminist in my brain.
Right. But back then, a lot of people didn't realize that was still awful. But like compared to, the jock gorilla brain, I want sex version, there was like, yeah, I'll take the nerd version.
And we get that really, really sharply in one of the poems called Cunning Linguistics. Did you guys read that?
Oh, God.
Poem?
Yeah.
I did. Yeah. And he just like, also a bad poem, but...
wretched poem, fucking wretched poem.
But like that was the mindset back then.
Yeah, doesn't make it okay.
I'm not saying it makes it okay. I'm saying that's why he got popular.
I'm like you mentioned, maybe I pick low hanging fruit because I just have so many blind spots in pop culture. But all I could associate these things with is the guy that made the Clerks movie. Like it's just really over the top, like vulgar with some aspiration towards being kind of like feminist or kind of subversive at the time, but with like a lot of the like, I don't know, what would be considered energy like of youth culture at the time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I would say Kevin Smith is pretty big.
Okay. Yeah. That guy. The Clerks guy.
I totally see that. How old do you think he was when he was performing that? Let me frame it this way. How old is it okay to be reading a poem like that? Like at what age does that become a problem?
I mean, I feel like the era you were born in decides that question, but...
Okay, but what age do you think he was reading that poem?
I think he was mid to late 20s, maybe.
I'm going to say 26. Yeah, mid.
He was 29.
Okay.
He was almost 30 years old reading that poem.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't surprise me.
Okay, just something in my head where it's like, I thought he was like 22 or 21, and almost that makes it better because you're like, okay, whatever, you're like young or whatever. He was 29. He was 2 or 3 years away from where I am right now in my life, and he was reading that poem about Nerd Poor Mouth Tour. I hate that. I think that's terrible. I want to bring us to...
That's the thing about geek culture back then, because there wasn't the internet and there wasn't any chance to like get a different perspective other than your own, and your own has been beaten down and rejected by the rest of society. So it's a very insular mindset where like the only thing you care about is geek shit.
And here's the thing: 15 years later, he's co-writing a Spielberg movie. Spielberg movie.
Because he managed to write a book that people like for some reason.
And because geek culture took over and won the entire fucking cultural
Culture wars.
Big love letter to geek culture.
The console wars. He won the console wars. Okay.
But I guess what I was trying to say is that if he read those poems now, he would be laughed out of whatever fucking venue he was reading.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
It's cringe as hell to quote the kids. But
also, I really hate when he's like, if you can tell me what Luke Skywalker's home planet is. It's like, what fucker doesn't know what Luke Skywalker's home planet is? That's not nerd fact.
But back in the 90s, that was rare to know.
Like, don't buy that. I think my mom in the 90s knew where, like, could name a couple planets from Star Wars. Like,
he's talking about people his age that he could talk to about, especially like girls. Because for a lot of guys in the 90s, they didn't meet girls who were into that kind of shit because they didn't have the internet and they had no way to fucking know.
There was no I Love Science page.
No, exactly.
There's no I fucking love science on Facebook where you can meet girls.
And I'm not saying it's right, but that's just how things were back then. So, like, I understand why he wrote, like, all this shit was written in the 90s. So I understand that kind of...
One of the things that really came through reading this book was, like, his intense bitterness towards, like, all the poems are really angry at jocks. This is a 29-year-old man who's really angry at jocks. Like, there's something really sad about that to me. And I think... Okay, I want to take us to the Cunning Linguistics poem. There's something about this poem in particular that really just like reminds me of being on Reddit when I was like 14.
Well, yeah, this is basically the 90s equivalent of trying to flirt with strangers on the internet.
I have to say that the line, but there are those among my brethren enlightened enough, is very much an early adumbration of like, good evening, fellow Redditors.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. There's like such a Reddit vibe. Like this is a proto Reddit vibe to this whole thing. Like I don't know. There's like a trajectory you can follow here from this in 2001 to like Reddit festering for like 10 years to like where we are now.
Well, yeah, Reddit is just a digital version of this same thing. Reddit is just it's like an insular community of like-minded people.
I suppose now that we're talking about
a lot of things were in the 90s, especially the poetry community. Because, like, who the fuck cared about poetry in the 90s? No one except for poets. What were you saying?
Oh, yeah, now that, Eleanor's kind of highlighted, like, the time, the micro era generation that this sprang from. I mean, I don't want to. I don't know if I want to call it. I guess I can understand why it'd be more fresh because I guess I'd associate this with like 2000 and like late 2000s Reddit or something, but I mean it was well before that. So even if it's like very, very like painful to get through it and painful to conceive of, like I could see it being fresh at the time.
Do either of you want to take us to a particular poem? Marcus, do you have a poem that in this collection that
I should say that I am referring again to my initial reaction that I brought up with the Clerks guy is that I mean, maybe I've voiced it to you before, but I just never liked comics in any way. And at least in the publication or this edition that I'm referencing, it has like these comic drawings. And it makes a lot more sense with those, but it makes me hate it a lot more because I just don't like comics or graphic novels. I'm very much like words and then some words. I
Well, can you describe some of these comic drawings for our listeners? Like, so what Marcus is talking about is that this particular publication that came out 2013 through Right Bloody, they appended some illustrations to each of these poems.
Yeah, I don't know
what's-
enough about like comics and like the styles or history of comic art to describe them, but I mean it's completely what you'd expect with art style that would spring from like Reddit sentiments. I should say that they at least accompany it well, that they're like hyperbolic. I mean, maybe all comics are, and angry and very, very explicitly kind of highlighting that these are nerd subjects. Like, look, guys with glasses, that look kind of awkward. So I think that going into this relatively blind, it actually allowed me to understand what this author was trying to do. I do have to say that I also don't like the majority of sci-fi, so I like a lot of the Battlestar Galactica or whatever stuff is like lost on me. Like maybe that's more niche. I don't know. It seems more niche than Star Wars because I know stuff about Star Wars and I don't really like sci-fi things or Star Trek or whatever. Offending people by grouping all those things as like starship media.
No, they're always
But yeah, I mean, I think drawing on a really limited bag of illusions, but maybe I mean that's a sign of the times that there was just this really condensed like set of shibboleths that were floating around at that time, like, oh, Luke Skywalker, but that's so just like commonplace now.
I don't think the drawings are necessarily like bad, but for me, it's very weird to have a bunch of kind of like cutesy drawings depicting all the like hateful shit that he spews in all of these poems.
The book is like so porn-brained and so hateful. All of the things that I look for in poetry is like I look for like empathy and I look for like some sort of connection with a human being. And this just like repulses me. Like it just like makes me feel like less in communion with the common man. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because he doesn't want to be in communion with a common man. All he cares about is other geeks, and it's very apparent in these poems. And I feel like that's understandable for the time that he grew up in because the rest of humanity told him to fuck off. So like I get why it's like that, but at the same time it's very repulsive because it's not really a mindset you want to be in.
Yeah, I agree.
And like I mentioned it earlier, but like I don't think these poems are necessarily bad. Like he's not a bad writer. Like the writing, the minute to minute writing, the structure of his poems, like it's not bad. Like he knows what he's doing.
Here's the thing.
He knows how to structure things to get the most effect.
There was one line that I really liked. The one part that I thought was really funny was in this poem called Curriculum Vitae.
That's also one that I could say something positive about, but go on, August.
Okay, I like structurally get this, and I get how this would work at a live reading. It's this poem that's structured like, oh, the things you say during a job interview, right? There's like so much room for hyperbole there. Like, I totally see how the scenario presented in the poem opens itself up to like a pretty good slam poem or whatever. And one of the funnier lines was when he says, "I am not now, nor have I ever been homosexual, but I'm willing to learn." That's where he should have ended the poem. That should have been the end of the poem.
Right.
He goes on for 2 more pages. Know when to cut it off.
Well,
Like,
that's another thing about this book is that he definitely goes on like for way too long in a lot of these poems, but also the way the book is structured, it just cuts off a lot of poems like halfway through the page and then continues like the next page afterwards after some image. And like you think the poem ends there because there's this weird break, but it's like, no, it actually keeps going. And it's like the very first poem is like that for me because he's talking, it's like it's called When I Was a Kid. And he's talking about how like kids these days wouldn't survive back in the 80s or whatever. But that poem has a really weird break where he's talking about video games and Ataris. And it ends on, or the page ends on, there were no multiple levels or screens. It was just one screen forever, and you could never win. And I thought that's actually a kind of cool way to end a poem. But then, the next page, it just keeps going, and it gets worse from there. And I was like, I really didn't need that.
One of the most valuable things I ever learned from my workshops when I was working with Lloyd Schwartz was cut out the last stanza of your poem and see if it's better. And this one is cut out 4 stanzas of your poem and see if it's better. And it always is because he's just in rant brain. It's totally.
But that lends to the slam poetry mindset because it just gives you more opportunities to earn points with the judges.
I do agree that it should have been shorter, and that for the genre, it has its merits. And at least in terms of the content he's talking about, I can take constructive criticism, I keep my workspace tidy, those observations are less dated because everyone everyone still has to be a team player and open to new technologies or whatever the hell people are supposed to say. And he, I think, pulls off well the hickory dickory dock, the mouse ran up the clock rhythm of slam poetry in this particular poem. So for what it is, it's probably the most successful out of the ones I read at doing what it's trying to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I thought Merlin, be quiet. You ever see him?
In Austin? Yeah, I have actually seen him a few times, but I've never talked to him.
Let's go to his house and tell him that he's fucked up with this book. Also, I want to say, what the fuck was Right Bloody doing publishing this in 2013? Okay, wait, no, that brings me to another point. There is a prison rape in this. Do you know what I'm talking about?
There is definitely a reference to prison rape.
I think it is that maybe, I think that line might be in the one about Jesus.
Yeah, that's the
Messiah.
I think that's the Jesus roommate one.
Yeah, that one would qualify as a big yikes.
Yikes. Yeah, I'd say that qualifies.
I'm trying to find that one so we can read it. Part of it.
I think it's the one before Nerd Porn Artur.
Want to read the first stanza of that, Eleanor?
Yeah, it's not great. The second semester of my sophomore year at college, I shared my dorm room with Jesus Christ, and I think I can honestly say that I wasn't the least bit trepidatious about sharing my dorm room with a foreign exchange student because I figured that anything had to be better than my last roommate, who was a dim-witted, misogynistic, knuckle-dragging, football-playing, business/physical education major whom I had considered killing in his sleep on several occasions just to get him out of my room, out of my life, and out of the gene pool. But luckily, he was now serving 5 to 15 years on 3 counts of date rape at a Cincinnati correctional facility where, if there is any justice, he is being sodomized on hourly shifts.
What? Okay, here's what I have to say about that. First of all, if you wrote this in 2001, it's not okay.
No,
but But if you're republishing this in 2013, you're Right Bloody Publishing, and you're republishing this? You're republishing the rape line?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm sure he was trying to be feminist because, he was a date rapist, so obviously he deserves to be raped, etc. But that's not.
Okay.
No, it's not. But I'm sure that was his mindset. At the time.
Yeah. I mean, that's logical, if not reasonable.
I don't want to like put lines on this where it was okay at a certain time and not okay at a certain time. 2001 though, okay, maybe I slightly understand this impulse, right? 2013 to not cut that? What is?
I mean, yeah,
I don't understand.
I agree.
I don't know about that one. But yeah, I really can't say, honestly. Although I will say he is dating or married to one of the editors of Right Bloody, so that probably has something to do with it.
She should know better. She should know better.
You would think so, but I have a lot of blind spots.
Should have been relegated to the status of like juvenilia to be forgotten.
Yes.
And yeah, it's I mean, the one, that poem you're referencing, what is the title of that one?
Of that one? That one is the I think that one's called Bottom.
Yeah, that one.
Bed Messiah. Bottom.
I think in the form and the content, it's just like a lot of the excesses that we've mentioned. Whereas the curriculum vitae one kind of does something with the form that he's working with, and I think succeeds at it. This one is more so like reading it aloud or reading it on the page. It's just like a rant, but not even in the spoken word style. It's just like meandering from like bad allusion to bad allusion, and then it ends, and it's like, oh, there's some shock factor for you, but it's not even like that shocking. It's just pretty gross.
So as I was researching this book, I found a really nice website, actually, and let me see if I can pull that up. And I want to give a little shout out to the Performance Poetry Preservation Project, also known as P4. And this is a website where someone or a group of people have gone to great lengths to archive a great amount of slam poetry related stuff, especially from the late 90s and early 2000s. And I think that's very thankless work. And what I find, there's a number of poems that didn't make it to the Right Bloody version. So what I did was I found someone on eBay who was actually selling a copy of the original chapbook from 2001. So I lied to this guy on eBay, and he sent me some pictures of some of the poems that were cut from this book. And the two poems that he sent me were a poem called 2 a.m. Again and a poem called The Skywalkers of Hazard. The Skywalkers of Hazard is just another boring bullshit geek poem. It's about how the Luke Skywalker is similar to the Dukes of Hazzard. That's the entirety of the poem. It's not particularly good or interesting.
Right.
But if we look at this poem called 2 a.m. Again, I want to read this poem because here's what's interesting to me is that this poem that was cut from the republication is better than any poem in the collection.
Okay. Interesting.
Oh, I did see
and
it.
I want to get both of your opinion of it. You saw it in the Google Drive link.
Yes, and it did. I'm on my skim. I'm like, yeah, this is out of place.
Yes. Okay, I'll read it. Actually, Marcus, would you like to read this one?
Yes, I can. 2 a.m. again. The remnants of my earliest childhood memory. I'm about 3 years old with this horrible earache that has me in the worst pain of my young life. And as you know, when you're a child and you're in pain, the pain is all there is, all that you are aware of. And I screamed and screamed like the world was going to end, screamed because it hurt so bad that it scared the hell out of me. Screamed loud enough to wake the neighbors at 2 a.m. with the relentless abandon of a child who has yet to learn the adult art of restraint or to acquire the skill of hiding pain. So I lay there, wailing on the kitchen floor with my head in her lap, and she is the clearest image in this memory for me, the familiar icon of mother stroking my hair, wincing at each scream and whispering the words of comfort that all mothers seem to inherently know as I wailed my way towards the sunrise. And in a blink, it's more than 2 decades later, and now her head is in my lap, and she doesn't have any hair left for me to stroke, and I know that she's in the worst pain of her entire life, but she doesn't make a sound, doesn't show it. Instead, she is whispering apologies for keeping me up all night, telling me to call the hospice nurse and get some rest. And I want to remind her of that night I had the earache, or of a dozen others just like it. But instead, I just collapse again into muttering, "I love you," over and over, a voice-cracking chant. And though it could make up for all the years of distance, guilt, and accusations that I had turned my back on both my God and my family, as though it could somehow make up for decades of being a less than perfect son. And I can admit now that at that moment she died, I resented the pastor's presence there in the room. And while the rest of my family took comfort in assuring each other that she was now in a heaven I had never seen any evidence of, with a God that I had never been able to make myself believe in, all I could feel was this crushing loss like lead in my throat. And then teeth-grinding rage at the mere mention of God and all, in this of all moments, when my mother and everything she was is just gone. And I want to believe in him now more than ever, to give my anger a focus, because if God does exist, then he is the author of all of this, of cancer, of long drawn-out deaths devoid of hope or dignity, filled with the empty promise of some gold-plated, white marble afterlife, where lives don't have to end and nothing is lost when someone dies. But for myself, I could never reconcile the existence of a kind and benevolent deity with the image I have of her lying there on the bed, almost a skeleton, clutching a Bible. And I was young enough until then to think that there might someday be answers or reasons, but I aged enough in that one night to realize that there is the self-indulgent act of grief, and then maybe someday acceptance, but at that moment, grief. And so, like the child I was, oblivious to all, I open up and scream like the world is going to end. Scream because it hurts so bad. It scares the hell out of me. Scream loud enough to wake the neighbors at 2 a.m.
Wow. Thank you for reading that. Okay. Why is that better than every poem in the actual republished collection?
Well, I mean, it's the only poem that gives us some insight into like the kind of person that he is and what he's gone through, other than just like beyond, like geek shit and anger. Even though that poem is all about just like his anger in his grief. But like, yeah, it's the only poem that feels real, like in that collection. The only poem that really feels like we're kind of getting to know him and that he's not just ranting.
I completely agree. Marcus, why do you think it wouldn't fit? And do you think he should have included it anyway?
Probably not. I mean, I don't think it fits. I don't think that it would be included like in a publication, like where, because it would make the rest of it so incoherent, because it does have some humanity in it, and because the again, I've kind of just been developing this while we've been speaking about these poems, and because it's really my first encounter with a lot of this stuff, aside from hearing some slam poetry here and there, that he he harnesses the form of like the slam poetry better here, probably than any of the others we read, maybe equally to the CV poem. And then like his use of repetitions and all that and the cadence of it is just more successful, and it's about something that not like doesn't make me repulsed. Like actually it's like really fitting. It's like really fitting, like the 2 a.m. thing. I'm like, oh, that's actually it's a good imagery.
And like it works really well. But like when
It's a successful poem.
Yeah, but when reading this poem, all I can think of is the anecdote you shared earlier, August, about like the guy who took dates to poetry readings. There was always someone who talked about cancer. Like it kind of feels a little bit manipulative when thinking about it in the slam poetry mindset. But
it's like him writing is like, okay, time to do my like tenderness ballad.
Right. There is that. But also I feel like the reason it wasn't included, it was because they were trying to capitalize off of his Ready Player One success, and so they wanted the book to be more about, you know, relating to
and I think Marcus is right that it doesn't fit.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
It's also better than any of the poems.
It's true. Yeah, they should have just written more. I mean, I don't want to tell people what they should have, shouldn't have done, because obviously, like, he's a successful rich person and I'm not. But like, I think that poem is better than all of the other ones, and I think that stuff more in that vein would appeal to me.
Yes, totally. It seems like a real person. It doesn't seem like some sort of cliche monster.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a hateful gremlin just with trying to stab jocks in their sleep or whatever.
Yeah, who's 29 and who's still thinking about jocks, knuckle dragging jocks in the high school image.
Yeah, it felt like.
Thank you for reading that, Marcus. I thought that was really good reading. I just want to say it's so funny to contrast that with the other unreleased poem that I got, Skywalkers of Hazard, which is just about Jabba the Hutt being boss hog.
I don't think we need to read that one.
Yeah, there's recordings of it online. That one is not as unreleased. So, one thing I was curious about is whether or not, I guess I was curious about if this book sold. So I got the sales data from the UK, but the US sales data they asked for $75 for, and I did not pay for. How many copies do you think The Importance of Being Earnest by Ernest Cline sold in the United Kingdom total?
That's tough. I don't know what the market is like. Is that like up to like today, like recent years?
It's up to when I sent this email, which was in April.
I'll throw a figure out.
Yeah,
75,000.
75,000.
That's way more than I was thinking. I was thinking like 10,000.
You're gonna go 10,000?
I was gonna go with 10,000.
According to our records, which are based on sales data from approximately 7,000 UK book retail outlets in the UK, Ernest Cline's The Importance of Being Earnest has sold just 500 copies.
Wow.
500 copies since publication.
Okay.
Wow.
I will tell, I guess what I was thinking of, like distribution to stores, and
Sure.
I was gearing up for like a huge figure because, again, kind of showing my ignorance. I'm like, maybe this would be like sold at some like, I don't even know what these things are called, like Comic-Con event or something. And in which case, like, it ends up in the hands of like 10,000 people over the course of like a weekend. So I thought, that explains.
No, that's a fair assumption.
Yeah.
I mean, the 500 figure really surprised me because according to the same person, Ready Player One sold more than 100,000 copies.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Ready Player One is like one of the most popular books. It's like ridiculous.
500 is abysmal. Let's be honest here. 500 over like 10 years? That's abysmal.
Yeah.
I sold more copies of my Mario Kart 64 book in 2 years.
Yeah, it's not great, especially if you have a book that has sold 100,000 copies. Like, That's not great.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that speaks to kind of how repulsive his poems are, that no one wants to pick this shit up.
We should go to his house. We live in the same city as him. We should go to his house and ask him to answer for these.
I have not. No. No, the police are going to refer to this podcast when something happens, so I'm not going to admit to anything.
We will go to his house. We're on our
No,
way. Ernest
no,
Cline.
don't say that.
Listen to
I'm
this.
not going with you. I'm not going with you.
We're already there.
If
We're
anything
knocking on the
happens,
door.
I'm not involved.
Knock, knock.
I'm not doing this.
That's me knocking on Ernest Cline's door. We're
Let
gonna
it be
ask you why
stated.
you wrote
Let it be
this.
stated for the record that I stayed home. I am not doing this.
Oh, well, I think we covered this book pretty well. I really like our discussion about it. Final thoughts?
I could have gone without reading it. But it's just I don't know. I don't know if it broadened my perspective at all. My final thoughts is again recapitulating the idea that it's hard to believe that this is a thing, but I guess it wasn't a thing if it only sold 500 copies.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not a great book, but I kind of, honestly, it just makes me sad. Like, like, not even like, I mean, like, sincerely, in a sincere way. Like, I hate that, like, things back then were so bad that he turned into such a hateful and, like, repulsive person inside. Like, it sounds like it sucks. Like, I wouldn't want to live like that. Like, I mean, I kind of do live like that. It sucks. But, like, I'm not that hateful. Even I'm not that hateful. And, like, I don't know. Yeah, it's just kind of sad.
I really wanted to start at the rock bottom. I feel like we started at a rock bottom.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think it's pretty rock bottom, and I also think that like the conversation and commentary generated by it is we're like forced to talk about the shock factor, like these 90s cultural aspects, because there's so little to grab onto. Yeah.
Yes, there's very little substance to it.
Yeah, it's just there's not much going on poetry-wise. It's just like it's only a thing because of slam poetry. That's I feel like being generous.
Yeah.
I think it can only go up from here in terms of material that we're going to be discussing and evaluating.
Well, thank you so much for both of you for joining me. This was enlightening as it was revolting to read those poems. And I'm glad he only sold 500 copies. Thank you for everyone who tuned in. Have a good night. And now for Marcus's Napoleon Minute, or as the French might call it, Minute Napoleon.
If I have a minute or less to dedicate to a Napoleon-related topic, I guess I can talk about how ubiquitous he is, because in two completely unrelated things I've been reading recently, he came up in a book by the philosopher Simone Weil. She turns a commonly used comparison on its head, and rather than calling something literally Hitler, she says, no, Hitler is Bonaparte. And a second completely unrelated reference is when the poet Marina Tsvetaeva says something about people not being of a century, that they are a century, and that Napoleon wasn't the 18th century, the 19th century, the 19th century was Napoleon, or maybe it's the other way around. But in any case, with my time dwindling, I really wish there were poems about people in his inner circle, like Jean Lannes, the Marshal and General, or Prince Eugène de Beauharnais, his stepson. Maybe there are, in which case I need to do some homework.